For strategic balance, we're reallocating some accounts across the team. Blake Morrison announced it during the Tuesday morning meeting. His voice casual, like he was discussing lunch plans. My 3 largest clients, Pinnacle Tech, Silverstone Industries, and Quantum Logistics, were being reassigned to another account manager effective immediately. I felt my face go hot. Around the conference table, 8 colleagues suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. Nobody met my eyes. Blake continued talking about optimizing resources and strengthening team capabilities, but I barely heard him. My brain was cataloging details. Pinnacle. 18 months of relationship building, 32% revenue growth. Silverstone. I'd rescued them from a competitor 6 months ago. Quantum. My most reliable account, steady renewals, 0 complaints. Then I noticed something. The reassignment list on the screen showed 7 accounts changing hands. Every single one had been mine. The accounts staying with their current managers. All connected to Blake's disastrous Q1 expansion strategy. The strategy I'd warned him about. In writing. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Smiled even. Professional. Blake glanced at me once, quickly, then looked away. The meeting ended. People filed out quietly. I stayed seated, staring at that list, understanding exactly what I was watching. I gathered my laptop and notebook slowly, giving everyone else time to leave first. My hands were steady. My voice would be steady too if anyone asked me about this. But nobody would ask. That was the point of doing it in a meeting. Public humiliation disguised as business strategy. Walking back to my desk, I passed Blake's office. His door was closed, blinds drawn. Hiding. I sat down and opened my email. 3 messages from clients asking about the transition. They'd been notified before I was. The disrespect was calculated. I replied to each one professionally, warmly, assuring them they'd be well taken care of. I didn't mention that I'd had no warning. Didn't mention the knot in my stomach. My desk phone rang. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my personal files folder, the one I kept on my laptop, not the company server. Inside was a subfolder labeled Q1 Concerns. I created it 4 months ago. The first document was an email I'd sent Blake in January. Subject line: Risk Assessment, Proposed Market Expansion. I remembered typing every word of that email. Remembered his response too. And I remembered what happened after he ignored it. January 15th. 4 months earlier. I'd spent a weekend reviewing Blake's proposal to expand into 3 new markets simultaneously. The numbers looked ambitious. Too ambitious. Our infrastructure couldn't support that kind of growth without significant hiring and system upgrades. I drafted the email carefully, keeping it factual and solutions focused. I see potential issues with timeline and resource allocation. Recommend we phase the expansion or increase support staff first. Blake's response came within an hour. Appreciate the input, but leadership is confident in this direction. We need to think bigger. 2 days later, I saw my email forwarded to the regional director, but Blake had added his own message above it. Example of the conservative thinking we need to move past. He'd used my caution as evidence that I lacked vision. The expansion launched in February. By March we were drowning. Customer complaints tripled. Response times doubled. 2 major accounts threatened to leave because we couldn't deliver on promises Blake had made. The company spent $1.8 million on emergency hiring and system patches. By April, quarterly revenue was down 12%. And somehow, my accounts were now under review. The review started quietly. An email from finance asking me to provide context on Q1 performance for my client portfolio. Standard procedure, the message said. Nothing to worry about. But I'd been here 6 years. I'd never been asked to provide context before. The numbers always spoke for themselves. I submitted a detailed breakdown. My accounts had grown 8% despite the chaos from Blake's expansion. Industry average was 3%. I included comparison data, client feedback scores, retention rates. 2 weeks later, I was copied on a report I hadn't written. It analyzed underperforming divisions and included selective data from my accounts, only the dips caused by the expansion problems, not the overall growth. My name appeared 6 times. Blake's name appeared once in the header, as department lead. The report concluded that certain account managers may need additional support and training. I read it twice, hands shaking. This was setup. Deliberate narrative construction. My accounts weren't underperforming. They were outperforming despite his disaster. But on paper, in this report, I looked like the problem. The reassignment was coming. Could feel it now. I started noticing other things. A client testimonial I'd secured last year was now featured in Blake's LinkedIn profile. Proud of my team's dedication to client success, his post said. My name wasn't mentioned. A case study about the Silverstone account rescue, my work, my strategy, was submitted to an industry publication with Blake listed as primary contributor. In team meetings, he'd reference our approach to client retention, describing tactics I'd developed and shared with him in one-on-one check-ins. My contributions were being absorbed, rebranded, erased. I said nothing. What could I say that wouldn't sound petty or defensive? Then Blake scheduled an important team meeting for the following Tuesday. No agenda provided. Just a calendar invite marked high priority. I knew what was coming. That weekend I didn't sleep well. I thought about speaking up, confronting him privately, maybe going to HR. But I didn't. Some instinct told me to wait. To watch. To document. On Monday, I started making copies of everything. Performance reports, client emails, revenue data, strategy documents. I saved them to my personal cloud storage, organized by date and category. Tuesday morning, I walked into that conference room with my smile ready and my recorder running. For strategic balance, we're reallocating some accounts across the team. I watched Blake deliver the news, noting every word, every gesture. The way he didn't look at me when he said, strategic. The way his voice got slightly louder when explaining the rationale. Around me, my colleagues shifted uncomfortably. They knew what this was. When he finished, there was a pause. Everyone expected me to react, to protest. I smiled and said, understood. I'll make sure the transition is smooth. Relief washed across Blake's face. He'd expected a fight. Instead, he got compliance. Great, he said quickly. I appreciate your professionalism. The meeting ended. People left quickly, avoiding eye contact. I packed up slowly, deliberately. Gave Blake time to retreat to his office, to feel safe behind his closed door. Then I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. 3 years of account data. Every client interaction. Every revenue report. Every email where I documented concerns, suggested improvements, or flagged problems. The story was all there. Crystal clear. Blake had made a catastrophic decision. I'd warned him. He'd ignored me, then blamed me when it failed. Now he was stealing my successful accounts to offset his failures. I wouldn't argue with him. I wouldn't appeal to HR. I wouldn't make speeches about fairness. I wouldn't argue with him. I wouldn't appeal to HR. I wouldn't make speeches about fairness. I would document everything and wait for the numbers to speak. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and 3 years of files. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too hot, too impulsive. What I felt was cold and focused. Blake thought he'd solved his problem. He'd taken my successful accounts, attached his name to past wins, and positioned me as someone who needed support. Clean narrative. But he'd made a mistake. He'd left a data trail. I created a spreadsheet. Column A, account name. Column B, revenue when I acquired it. Column C, revenue at end of last quarter. Column D, growth percentage. Column E, industry benchmark. I filled in 23 accounts I'd managed over 3 years. The pattern was unmistakable. Every account had grown. Most had exceeded industry averages. Several had doubled their contract values. Then I created a second sheet. Blake's strategic decisions over the same period. market expansion costs, failed product launches, client losses due to overpromising. I mapped the timeline of his mistakes against the timeline of his blame shifting. It was perfect, precise, irrefutable. I saved everything to 3 separate cloud services, backed it up on an external drive. Then I poured myself tea and went to bed early. Tomorrow, I'd smile and train whoever was taking over my accounts. I'd be helpful and professional. And I'd wait. The patterns in the data were remarkable once I laid everything out chronologically. January 2023. Blake's expansion strategy launched. Company spent $400,000 on new market infrastructure. February 2023. Customer complaints increased 47%. I documented this in an email to Blake. He replied, "Growing pains. We'll adjust." March 2023. 2 major clients threatened to cancel due to service delays. I personally called both, smoothed things over, negotiated extended timelines. Both stayed. April 2023. Emergency hiring spree. Company spent another $1.2 million on recruitment and training. May 2023. Q1 revenue report showed 12% decline. Blake's internal memo blamed market conditions and transition challenges. June 2023. Finance started reviewing account performance. My accounts were flagged despite being the only ones showing growth. The timeline told the story Blake didn't want told. His decision created chaos. I mitigated the damage. He took credit for my solutions and blamed me for his mistakes. Then I noticed something else in the current quarter's reporting structure. Revenue was now being categorized as team performance, rather than individual account manager contributions. Attribution had become deliberately vague. Ownership intentionally blurred. I found the original reporting templates from last year. Saved them. The new reporting format appeared in early June, right after the account review began. Before, account manager. Name. Q2 revenue. Amount. Growth. Percentage. After. Department revenue. Total amount. Team collaboration. Multiple contributors. Individual wins disappeared into collective outcomes. My 23% account growth became department performance. But I had the old reports. Every quarter for 3 years. Clear attribution, specific numbers, undeniable results. I saved the new template alongside the old ones. Created a comparison document showing exactly when and how the reporting structure changed. This wasn't accidental. This was strategic erasure. Blake was rewriting history in real time, and he thought nobody would notice because nobody kept personal records. He was wrong. I spent that evening organizing files into a master folder. Performance documentation, 2021 to 2024. Inside were subfolders for each year, each quarter, each major account milestone, email timestamps, client testimonials, revenue reports, strategy proposals, risk assessments, everything dated, sourced, verifiable. I labeled the folder clearly and saved it in 4 separate locations. Then I waited to see what Blake would do next. My quarterly performance review was scheduled for July 10th. Blake conducted it in a small conference room, just the 2 of us. He opened with generic positives. Your client communication skills are strong. You're reliable. Then came the shift. However, I'm concerned about your strategic impact. Your portfolio hasn't shown the growth we need from senior account managers. Kept my face neutral. Which accounts specifically? Overall trajectory, he said vaguely. Looking at the department metrics, you're not pacing with team performance. The accounts that were reassigned last month were all exceeding growth targets, I said quietly. That's actually part of the concern. We needed to redistribute them to develop other team members. He smiled. But it also revealed some dependency issues. Those accounts performed well because of our collective approach, not individual contribution. Our collective approach. My work reframed as team effort. I see, I said. I'm marking you as meets expectations this quarter. I think we need to see more ownership and initiative from you moving forward. Meets expectations. After 3 years of exceeding every metric. I signed the review without comment. Blake looked relieved again. He kept expecting me to fight. Kept being surprised when I didn't. I left the meeting and went back to my desk. 2 days after the review, Blake asked me to train Alicia, the account manager taking over Pinnacle Tech. Just get her up to speed on the relationship dynamics, key contacts, that sort of thing, he said casually. I agreed immediately. Alicia was competent but hadn't handled enterprise clients before. She approached the training sessions nervously, taking extensive notes. Pinnacle's CFO prefers email communication, but the procurement director likes quick calls, I explained. They have budget meetings first Tuesday of every month. Submit proposals by the Friday before if you want them reviewed in cycle. Alicia wrote everything down. This is incredibly helpful. I don't know why Blake didn't brief me on any of this. He's been busy, I said diplomatically. Over 3 training sessions, I realized Alicia didn't understand the account history. She didn't know I'd personally rebuilt the relationship after a service failure 2 years ago. Didn't know about the custom pricing structure I'd negotiated. Didn't know the CFO's concerns about vendor consolidation. She had access to files and contracts, but not the context. Not the relationships. Blake had taken my accounts but couldn't transfer the actual value I'd built. Trust, understanding, responsiveness. I taught Alicia everything I could. It wasn't her fault she'd been handed accounts she wasn't prepared for. Then I waited to see what would happen when she was on her own. Started small. An email from Pinnacle's procurement director that sat unanswered for 2 days because Alicia was out sick and Blake hadn't set up proper coverage. Then a proposal submitted to Silverstone 3 days past their internal deadline. They accepted it but noted the delay wasn't typical of our partnership. Quantum Logistics requested a strategy meeting. Alicia scheduled it but didn't prepare adequately. The client called me directly afterward, confused about some of Alicia's responses. Is everything okay on your end? The quantum contact asked me. The transition seems rough. Just some adjustment period, I said. Alicia's great. She'll find her rhythm. But she wouldn't because Blake hadn't given her the support she needed. He just moved names on a spreadsheet and expected the relationships to transfer automatically. By August, response times across all 3 accounts had increased. Client satisfaction scores dipped slightly. Nothing catastrophic but noticeable. Meanwhile, Blake sent out a team email praising strong Q2 performance and thanking everyone for their dedication. My name wasn't mentioned. Then finance announced the quarterly revenue review would be in September, 2 weeks earlier than usual. I marked the date in my calendar and checked my backup files one more time. Everything was ready. In mid-August, I had coffee with a former colleague who'd moved to Apex Solutions, a competitor firm. We're expanding our enterprise division, he said. Looking for experienced account managers. Interested? I didn't hesitate. Very. 2 weeks later I had an offer. Better title, better pay, better team structure. Start date. October 15th. I accepted immediately but told them I needed to keep it quiet until my notice period. They agreed. I didn't tell anyone at my current company. Didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't mention it to coworkers. My exit date was strategically chosen. 2 weeks after the September revenue review. I wanted to be present for that meeting. Wanted to see the numbers presented clearly, officially, undeniably. Then I'd leave. Blake would have to explain my departure to leadership, to clients, to the team. He'd have to manage the fallout from losing institutional knowledge he'd taken for granted. But more importantly, the revenue data would speak for itself before I left. The timeline of account performance before and after the reassignment would be documented in official company records. I couldn't be accused of bitterness or sour grapes if I was simply presenting facts, then moving on professionally. I finalized my resignation letter and saved it with a future send date. Then I waited for September. The preliminary Q3 numbers came out September 3rd, 2 weeks before the official review meeting. Department revenue was down 8% compared to Q2. Industry trends were flat, so the decline was notable. I pulled the detailed breakdown from the finance portal. The 3 accounts Blake had reassigned from me were all underperforming compared to their historical trends. Pinnacle Tech, down 6%. First decline in 18 months. Silverstone Industries, flat growth, down from 12% average quarterly increases. Quantum Logistics, down 4%, first decrease in 2 years. The other accounts Blake had left alone. Mixed results but mostly stable. My remaining portfolio, the smaller accounts he deemed less strategic, 11%. The story was clear. The accounts performed well under my management. They struggled after reassignment. I saved the preliminary report and compared it to the previous 8 quarters. Created a simple graph showing performance trends before and after the reassignment. The visual was damning. On September 5th, Blake sent an urgent team email. Leadership has questions about Q3 performance. Need all account managers to prepare status reports by Friday. I prepared mine carefully, factually, without commentary. My remaining accounts, strong performance, detailed explanations for growth. That was all. I didn't mention the reassigned accounts. Didn't need to. On Friday, Blake looked stressed. His door stayed closed all afternoon. The whispers started Monday morning. Blake had a long meeting with the regional director Friday afternoon. Someone mentioned at the coffee machine. Finance is asking a lot of questions about the account transitions, another colleague said quietly. By Tuesday, Blake was deflecting. In a team meeting, he casually mentioned transition challenges and how change management takes time. Then he looked at me. Though I wonder if the handoff process could have been more thorough. The implication was clear. My fault for inadequate training. My fault the accounts were struggling. I said nothing. On Wednesday, I was copied on an email to the regional director. Blake had written, "The recent account reassignments have revealed some knowledge gaps in our transition protocols. I recommend we develop more structured handoff procedures to prevent dependency on individual relationships." He was spinning it, making it about process failures, not his strategic mistake. But the regional director's response was interesting. "Let's discuss. Please bring documentation of pre- and post-transition performance for the accounts in question." Documentation. Numbers. Evidence. Blake called an emergency one-on-one with me. "I need you to put together a timeline of your work with Pinnacle, Silverstone, and Quantum. Client history, key milestones, relationship notes. When do you need it?" "Tomorrow." I delivered it Thursday morning. 20 pages of detailed account history, meticulously documented, completely factual. I didn't need to add commentary. The work spoke for itself. Blake's hands shook slightly when he took the folder. Finance requested my documentation directly. Not through Blake. Not as a team submission. They emailed me specifically. "Please provide account performance data for your former clients, Pinnacle, Silverstone, and Quantum, covering the 18 months prior to reassignment." I sent them everything. Revenue trends, growth percentages, client satisfaction scores, contract renewals, upsell successes. I also included the timeline I'd created months ago, showing account performance correlated with management decisions and organizational changes. The email thread was brief, professional. Finance thanked me for the thorough documentation. Then they asked a follow-up question. "Can you provide context for the Q1 revenue decline and how it affected your account management approach?" This was the opening. I attached my January email to Blake, the risk assessment he'd dismissed. I included his response and the subsequent forward to leadership where he'd framed my caution as conservative thinking. I added the timeline of emergency spending, customer complaints, and service delays. Then I documented how I'd personally managed to retain clients and grow accounts despite the chaos. All facts. No accusations. Just data with context. Finance replied, "Thank you. This is very helpful for our analysis." 2 days later, I saw a calendar invite, Finance and Legal Review Meeting, Account Performance Analysis. My name was on the attendee list. Blake's name was there too. The meeting was scheduled for Monday, September 18th, the same day as the quarterly revenue review. This was going to be interesting. The review meeting started with standard presentations, regional performance, market trends, competitive analysis. Then finance presented the Q3 revenue breakdown. The slide showed department performance by account segment. My former accounts were highlighted in red, underperforming compared to historical trends. The next slide showed a timeline. Performance before reassignment. Performance after. The decline was obvious. Someone from finance spoke. We've noticed a correlation between account transitions and revenue dips. We wanted to understand the factors contributing to this pattern. Blake jumped in quickly. Transition challenges are normal. We expected some short-term impact but believe the long-term benefits of team development outweigh. Except the transitions weren't driven by development needs, the finance director interrupted. According to our review, these were high-performing accounts reassigned from a high-performing manager during a period of departmental stress. Silence. The finance director continued. We've reviewed documentation showing the revenue decline began in Q1, following a strategic expansion decision. The accounts in question actually outperformed during that difficult period, which raises questions about why they were reassigned. Blake's face went pale. The reassignment was about strategic balance. The reassignment happened 2 weeks after finance flagged declining department revenue, finance said. It appears to have been reactive rather than strategic. More silence. Then legal spoke up. We'd like to understand the decision-making process behind the Q1 expansion and subsequent organizational changes. Blake fumbled for words. The regional director was staring at him, expression unreadable. This wasn't going how he'd expected. That evening my phone rang. Blake's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I didn't answer. Then a text. We should talk. Some misunderstandings in today's meeting. I didn't respond. Third call. This time I answered and immediately started recording on my personal device. Hey, Blake said, voice too casual. Crazy meeting today, right? Finance really went overboard with the analysis. Did they? Yeah, they're making it seem like the account changes were some kind of mistake. Just transition friction, Normal stuff. Look, I think if we present a unified front, explain the strategic rationale, this whole thing blows over. You know how finance gets. They see patterns where there aren't any. I said nothing. I'm just saying it would help if you backed up the team development angle. You trained Alicia, you saw the value in spreading knowledge across the team. Right. That's not why the accounts were reassigned. What? The accounts were reassigned to offset the revenue decline from your Q1 expansion strategy. Long silence. That's. His voice changed. Harder. That's a pretty serious accusation. I'd be careful about making claims like that without proof. I have proof. Emails, performance data, timelines. I submitted everything to finance. Another pause. Then his voice shifted again, softer, almost pleading. Look, we've worked together 6 years. I've always supported your career. This doesn't have to get ugly. Just, let's work together on this. Please. I think finance and legal have what they need. Hung up. The entire call was saved. Timestamp. Backed up. September 22nd. Finance released a revised Q3 revenue report. The new version included corrected attribution for historical account performance. My name was now properly credited for the growth I'd generated prior to reassignment. The report also noted, departmental revenue decline correlates with Q1 strategic expansion costs and subsequent organizational disruption, not individual account manager performance. Blake's expansion strategy was now officially identified as the primary factor in declining revenue. The reassignment of successful accounts was noted as reactive rather than strategic, likely exacerbating rather than resolving underlying performance issues. It was devastating. Professional, factual, and devastating. That afternoon, I received a calendar invite. Performance discussion, leadership request. Attendees. Me, the regional director, HR director, and finance director. Blake was not invited. The meeting was scheduled for September 25th. I accepted the invitation and continued my normal work. My resignation letter was still queued. Send date set for September 27th. Just a few more days. On September 24th, Blake's calendar suddenly cleared. All meetings cancelled. His office door stayed closed. Word spread quickly. He'd been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The investigation my documentation had triggered. The September 25th meeting was in a corner conference room I'd never been in before. Large windows, expensive furniture, bottles of water arranged on the table. The regional director started. Thank you for your time. We've completed our review of the Q3 performance issues and the organizational changes in your department. He nodded. Your documentation was extremely helpful. The timeline and data you provided gave us clarity on decisions that previously seemed unclear. I'm glad I could help. The finance director spoke next. Your account showed consistent growth over 3 years, even during periods of organizational difficulty. The decline after reassignment is significant and concerning. I said nothing. Let the numbers speak. We have questions about the work environment under Blake Morrison's management. Did you feel pressured to accept the account reassignment? I chose my words carefully. I felt the decision had already been made. Objecting seemed futile. Did you raise concerns about the Q1 expansion strategy before it was implemented? Yes. In January, I sent a detailed risk assessment to Blake via email. And his response? He forwarded it to leadership with commentary suggesting my caution indicated a lack of vision. The HR director leaned forward. Did you feel you could escalate your concerns beyond Blake? I considered it. But he'd already framed my input as resistance to growth. I worried escalating would damage my reputation further. The room was quiet. The regional director spoke again. Blake Morrison has been placed on leave. The investigation will take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, we'd like to offer you a retention package, salary increase, title promotion, and reassignment of your former accounts back to your portfolio. I had rehearsed this moment. I appreciate the offer. May I have until Friday to consider it? Of course. The meeting ended. Everyone shook my hand. I walked out calmly. My resignation letter was scheduled to send Friday morning. Blake's suspension became official September 26th. An internal email announced temporary leadership changes, without details. I was asked to take over several of his responsibilities during the transition period. I agreed, knowing I'd be gone in 2 days. On September 27th, my resignation email sent automatically at 9 a.m. It was brief and professional. After careful consideration, I've accepted a position at another organization. My last day will be October 11th. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had here and will ensure a smooth transition. The regional director called me within an hour. I just saw your resignation. Can we discuss this? I've accepted another offer. The decision is final. The retention package we discussed, we can improve the terms significantly. I appreciate that, but I've already committed to the new role. Silence. Then. I understand. This is a significant loss for the organization. I want you to know your contributions haven't gone unnoticed, despite how recent events may have felt. Thank you. For what it's worth, the investigation into Blake's management practices is concluding this week. The findings will likely result in termination. I see. Your documentation was conclusive. He systematically took credit for your work and attempted to blame you for his failures. That behavior has no place in this organization. I said nothing. I hope your new role appreciates what they're getting. We ended the call professionally. Blake's termination was announced October 3rd. The email was corporate speak. Blake Morrison is no longer with the organization. We thank him for his service and wish him well. But internally everyone knew. The investigation had found evidence of credit misappropriation, retaliation against employees who questioned his decisions, and misrepresentation of performance data. My documentation had been the foundation of the case, but investigators had found similar patterns with other team members. I wasn't his only target, just his most thorough victim. HR approached me again about staying. We understand you have another commitment, but is there any flexibility? We'd like to restructure the department and would value your input. I'm honored, but I've already started transitioning responsibilities at my new role. They offered a consulting arrangement. Part-time, high hourly rate. Help rebuild department culture and processes. I declined. Clean break was better. On October 9th, my former clients sent farewell messages. Pinnacle's CFO wrote, "Whatever happened behind the scenes, I want you to know you built a partnership we valued. Good luck in your next chapter." Silverstone's director, "You turned around a relationship we'd almost given up on. That doesn't get forgotten." Quantum's team, "The transition hasn't been the same. Hope your new company knows what they're getting." I saved every message. My last day was October 11th. No farewell party. I'd requested none. Just quiet handoffs and final emails. The regional director stopped by my desk. "Before you go, I want you to know the finance report we issued credits you specifically for the account growth you generated. That attribution is now permanent in our records." I appreciate that. Your former clients have also been informed that the service disruptions they experienced were due to internal management issues that have been addressed. Your reputation with them has been clarified. This mattered. Blake had tried to tarnish my professional standing. Now it was officially restored. We're also updating our reporting structures to prevent the attribution issues you documented. Individual contributions will be clearly tracked going forward. Smiled. That will help a lot of people. That evening, the senior vice president of the region called my cell phone. "I wanted to apologize personally," she said. "Blake's behavior should have been caught earlier. Your work spoke for itself, but our systems failed to protect you from someone systematically undermining your contributions. I appreciate you saying that. If you're ever interested in returning, you'll have an open door. And I mean that literally. My door, direct access, no intermediaries. Thank you. That means a lot." We talked for 20 minutes. She asked about my new role, congratulated me on moving forward. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. 2 weeks into my new job at Apex Solutions, I received an unexpected email. The subject line, "Consulting opportunity, your terms." It was from Blake's replacement at my former company, a woman named Victoria Chen who'd been promoted from a different region. "I've reviewed the department restructuring needs and the documentation you provided during the investigation. Your strategic insights and client management approaches would be valuable as we rebuild. I'd like to propose a consulting arrangement where you advise on client retention protocols and performance tracking systems. Fully remote, flexible hours, premium rate. You define the scope and timeline." I read it twice. This wasn't about retention or desperation. This was about recognizing expertise and creating value. I called Victoria that afternoon. We discussed the scope, quarterly strategy sessions, review of reporting systems, training on relationship-building approaches. "I want to be clear," Victoria said. "This isn't about fixing what Blake broke. It's about institutionalizing what you built so one person can't dismantle it again. That I can support." We agreed on terms. 6-month contracts, specific deliverables, generous compensation. I'd be paid well to share the knowledge Blake had tried to steal. The irony was perfect. 3 months after leaving, I was thriving. My role at Apex Solutions exceeded expectations. I'd brought in 4 major clients, implemented new retention strategies, and been promoted to senior director. The consulting work with my former company was satisfying too. Victoria implemented every system I recommended, and department performance was recovering. Most importantly, my reputation was intact. Better than intact, strengthened. When people asked about my departure, I kept it simple. The organization and I had different visions for the future. The transition was professional, and I'm grateful for what I learned there. No bitterness. No drama. Just facts. Blake had tried to steal my accounts, erase my contributions, and blame me for his failures. Instead, his actions triggered an investigation that exposed a pattern of misconduct, cost him his career, and ultimately proved exactly what I'd known all along. The numbers didn't lie. The documentation didn't lie. The results spoke for themselves. He'd stolen my accounts to cover his mistake. The revenue report told a different story. And that story was the truth. I moved forward, stronger, respected, with my integrity completely intact. He'd wanted to make me disappear from the narrative. Instead, I became the evidence that brought the whole thing down. I didn't need revenge. I just needed receipts. And the receipts were perfect.